Welcome to our insightful and impressive story today. Billionaire kicks his wife outhouse after she gives birth to black triplets. But he's left speechless. The events unfold as a wealthy businessman takes drastic steps, kicking his wife out of their lavish home. Her apparent transgression? Giving birth to triplets who challenge his expectations and assumptions in ways he never anticipated. Left alone in his vast estate, he experiences a profound transformation. He begins to reflect on the complexities of love, family, and identity. The journey into introspection forces him to confront the biases that have clouded his judgment. As he delves into the depths of his soul, he uncovers the true meaning of fatherhood and the responsibilities it entails. Meanwhile, his wife's own journey is one of resilience and courage. Thrust into an unexpected and challenging situation, she draws upon her inner strength to forge a new path for herself and her children. Inform us if you are enthusiastic about this narrative. If you are, press 1 if you found the video to be enjoyable. If this is not the case, press 0. Your comments are a great source of motivation for me to collect more stories that are uplifting and meaningful.
A heartless white millionaire abandons his wife after she gives birth to 3 black children. No one suspected that, a few months later, he has to sell his company because the sharp scent of antiseptic lingered in the air, blending with the rhythmic beeping of nearby monitors. Olivia lay on the hospital bed, her body heavy with exhaustion, but her heart light as a feather. In her arms rested 3 tiny bundles, Peter, Nick, and Noah. Their cries had softened into faint murmurs, their small hands curling instinctively around the edges of their swaddling blankets. "They're perfect," she whispered, her voice hoarse but filled with awe. A faint smile graced her lips, though her eyes brimmed with unshed tears. She glanced up as a nurse entered the room, her steps brisk but careful, holding a clipboard in one hand. "They truly are," the nurse said warmly, leaning closer to inspect the babies. "Quite rare, too. Triplets, and each one so strikingly unique." She gestured gently at their soft curls, darker than Olivia's own golden strands. "Beautiful," she added, her tone sincere, before making a note on the clipboard. Olivia nodded, her thumb lightly brushing over Peter's impossibly tiny fingers. She barely registered the nurse's words. Her world had narrowed to these 3 fragile beings, each one a miracle she never thought she'd hold. The door creaked open, breaking her reverie. Thomas's familiar voice preceded him. "I brought coffee," he announced with a grin, his voice buoyant as he stepped inside. He froze, mid-stride. For a moment, his smile held, hesitant. But there. Then his gaze fell on the triplets, and something flickered in his eyes. Olivia couldn't name it at first. Surprise, unease. He moved closer, each step deliberate, as if he were approaching something fragile and foreign. "There. Here," he said, his voice faltering on the last word. Olivia laughed softly, brushing off the odd tone. "Yes, Thomas. Meet Peter, Nick, and Noah." Her face glowed with pride as she gestured toward the tiny faces tucked snugly against her chest. "Aren't they wonderful?" Thomas's mouth opened as if to speak, but he quickly closed it, his jaw tightening. He leaned closer, his fingers brushing against Nick's blanket, though his movements were stiff, uncertain. "They look different," he said finally, his words carefully measured. Olivia's brows furrowed. "Different," she repeated, shifting slightly to look at him more clearly. He straightened, glancing between her and the babies. "Their skin. It's—" He stopped himself, forcing a chuckle that sounded anything but natural. "I mean, they're darker than I expected. Must be some recessive genes at play." Olivia blinked, her exhaustion dulling the edge of her confusion. "Recessive genes," she echoed, her tone faintly amused. "Thomas, they're just newborns. Their features will change as they grow." Thomas nodded, but his gaze lingered too long on Peter's soft curls and Noah's olive-toned skin. The cheer in his voice was gone, replaced by a subdued edge. "Right. "Of course. I'm just, surprised, that's all." The silence stretched between them like an unwelcome guest. Olivia adjusted her hold on the babies, her maternal instincts flaring under Thomas's scrutiny. "They're perfect," she said, her voice firm now, as if challenging him to disagree. "Sure," Thomas said quickly, too quickly. He turned abruptly, running a hand through his hair. His grip on the coffee cup tightened until his knuckles whitened. I should call my parents. Let them know." Olivia watched as he retreated toward the door, her heart sinking under the weight of his unease. "Thomas," she called softly, her voice laced with concern. "Is something wrong?" He paused, his back to her, shoulders tense. "No, everything's fine," he said, but the words sounded hollow. Without turning around, he muttered almost under his breath, "I just didn't expect this." And then he was gone, the door clicking shut behind him. Olivia sat motionless, the warmth of her earlier joy fading into a cold knot in her chest. She glanced down at her sons, their tiny faces serene and unknowing. The room, once filled with hope and wonder, now felt stiflingly quiet. Her fingers trembled as she adjusted the blankets around the babies, her mind replaying Thomas's words and the way he had looked at them, as if they were strangers. A faint chill crept through her, mingling with the soft warmth of the newborns in her arms. Something had shifted in that moment, something she couldn't yet name. The triplets' cries echoed through the small apartment, weaving into the already tense atmosphere like an unwelcome thread. Olivia moved swiftly between the cribs, cradling Noah in one arm while patting Peter's back with her free hand. Nick, momentarily pacified, stared at her with wide, glassy eyes from his bassinet. "Shh, sweethearts," Olivia murmured, her voice thin with exhaustion. "Mommy's here." The faint sound of keys jingling at the door caught her attention. Thomas walked in, his tie loosened, eyes heavy with something that Olivia couldn't name. His glance swept the room briefly before landing on the babies. "You're late," Olivia said gently, trying not to let her frustration seep through. Thomas shrugged, dropping his bag onto the kitchen counter. "Work ran over." Olivia didn't press further. She couldn't handle another clipped response, another reminder of the widening chasm between them. Instead, she turned her focus back to the triplets, tucking Peter into his crib before lowering her voice. "Dinner's in the oven." Thomas didn't reply. He lingered by the door, as if considering whether to step fully inside. The man who used to wrap her in his arms the moment he walked through the door now stood stiff and detached, an invisible barrier dividing them. Later at dinner, the air between them was brittle. Thomas's father sat at the head of the table, his sharp eyes darting between the triplets, now napping in the adjacent room, and Olivia, who sat silently across from Thomas. "So," Thomas's father began, swirling his wine glass in deliberate, lazy circles, "these babies, quite remarkable, aren't they?" Olivia's fork paused midway to her mouth. She set it down carefully, her heart already racing. "They are," she replied evenly, though her voice held a tremor. "Healthy, beautiful boys." Thomas's father let out a low hum, one that carried neither agreement nor dissent. "They don't look much like you or Thomas, though," he added, the words slicing through the fragile civility at the table. Olivia's throat tightened. They're newborns. Features change. The older man's gaze didn't waver, and Olivia felt it, like a weight pressing against her chest. She turned to Thomas, hoping for support, but he kept his eyes on his plate, sawing mechanically at a piece of overcooked chicken. "I mean," his father continued, his tone sharpening, "a skin tone like that. It's not common in our family, is it, Thomas?" Thomas's knife stilled for a moment, but he didn't look up. Olivia's pulse quickened. "Thomas," she said, her voice steady but rising, "are you seriously going to sit there and let your father question your own children?" Thomas finally raised his head. His face was blank, his tone flat. "He's not wrong to notice, Olivia. It's, surprising is all." The words landed like a slap. Olivia pushed her chair back abruptly, the scrape of wood against tile breaking the uneasy silence. "Excuse me," she said, her voice tight. She walked into the nursery, her heart pounding, and closed the door behind her. She leaned against it, eyes burning but refusing to cry. That night, the argument came like a storm. Thomas sat on the couch, scrolling aimlessly through his phone, while Olivia stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "We need to talk," she said, her voice resolute. Thomas sighed, setting his phone aside. "I'm tired, Olivia. Too tired to talk about what your father said tonight. About how you didn't defend me. Defend your children." Thomas pinched the bridge of his nose. "Don't start. Don't start," Olivia's voice cracked. "You let him insult me, insult us, and you just sat there. What am I supposed to think?" Thomas's face darkened. "What do you want me to say? That I don't have questions? That I don't wonder how this happened?" Olivia stepped back, as if physically struck. "You're accusing me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You think I was unfaithful." Thomas stood, his voice rising. "Look at them, Olivia. Do you expect me to ignore the obvious? They don't look like me." "They're your sons," Olivia shouted, the anger finally breaking free. "How can you even say that?" "I'm just saying," Thomas said weakly. "If there's nothing to hide, why not prove it?" Olivia's chair scraped against the floor as she stood abruptly, her composure cracking. "Prove it," she said, her voice trembling with fury. "You want me to prove my loyalty to you after everything we've been through?" The triplets stirred in the next room, their soft cries punctuating the heated silence. Thomas grabbed his coat, his movements jerky. "I need air," he muttered. Olivia followed him to the door. "Don't walk away," she pleaded, her voice raw. "Don't leave like this." Thomas turned, his face a mixture of anger and something else, something colder. "I don't even know who you are anymore, Olivia." The door slammed shut behind him. Later that night, Olivia sat in the nursery, her body trembling from the confrontation. The babies lay in their cribs, their small chests rising and falling peacefully, oblivious to the storm that had erupted in the next room. Her eyes moved to Peter, who stirred lightly in his sleep. She reached into the crib, gently smoothing his curls. "You didn't ask for this," she whispered, her voice breaking. "None of you did." The room felt stifling, the walls pressing in as she sat among the soft glow of the nightlight. She thought of Thomas's silence, his father's smugness, and the disbelief in Thomas's eyes every time he looked at their children. How could someone she'd trusted so deeply see her so wrongly? Olivia straightened, her jaw tightening with resolve. She couldn't stay here, not in this house, not in this marriage that had become a battlefield. She looked at her babies again, their innocence a stark contrast to the chaos swirling around them. She whispered into the quiet, "I'll protect you. I promise." For the first time in weeks, she felt the faint stirrings of clarity. It wouldn't be easy, but she knew what she had to do. The apartment was silent, save for the soft ticking of the clock above the kitchen doorway. Olivia stood in the nursery, her fingers trembling as she folded tiny onesies into a well-worn duffel bag. The faint smell of baby lotion clung to her hands, grounding her amidst the swirl of her thoughts. On the dresser sat a single sheet of paper. Her pen hovered above it, hesitating before finally pressing down to scrawl the words that had been sitting heavy in her chest. "Thomas, I fought so hard to keep this family together, but I can't fight alone. When you accused me, when you doubted not just me, but our children. You broke something I'm not sure I can mend. I don't know who we are anymore, or if we can find our way back. For the sake of our children, I need to leave. I need to find a place where love isn't a question, and trust isn't a test. Maybe someday, you'll understand what you've lost. Olivia. Her hand lingered over her name before placing the pen down. She folded the letter neatly, her motions deliberate, and slid it into an envelope. In the next room, the triplets stirred. Olivia wiped her eyes quickly, moving to lift Nick from his crib. He whimpered briefly before settling against her shoulder, his soft breath tickling her neck. The city was quiet under the cloak of night. Olivia loaded the last bag into the trunk of her car, her movements quick but silent. The triplets, swaddled and snug in their car seats, made only the faintest murmurs as she gently secured them. Her gaze flicked to the apartment building one last time, its shadowed windows bearing silent witness to her departure. The drive out of Boston was slow and deliberate. The weight of her decision pressed heavily on her chest, each mile pulling her farther from the life she had once fought to build. She glanced in the rearview mirror at the sleeping faces of her children, their innocence a stark contrast to the storm that had driven her away. As the city lights faded into the distance, the countryside opened before her. The sprawling fields and dense woods of Vermont welcomed her, the air growing cooler with each mile. Olivia's grip on the steering wheel tightened. She was leaving behind chaos, but what awaited her was a question she had no answer for. The gravel crunched beneath her tires as she pulled into the driveway of her grandparents' old house. The modest structure stood resolute among the towering trees, its wooden frame weathered but inviting. Light spilled from the front windows, and the door opened before she could step out of the car. "Olivia!" her mother called, hurrying down the steps. Her arms opened wide as Olivia approached, clutching Nick to her chest. "I didn't know where else to go," Olivia admitted, her voice breaking. Her mother enveloped her in a hug, her hand stroking Olivia's hair. "You're home now. That's all that matters." Inside, the house smelled of freshly baked bread and pine wood. Olivia moved quietly, setting up a makeshift nursery in the room that had once been hers as a child. The triplets adjusted quickly, their cries softening as they drifted back to sleep in their cribs. Exhaustion pulled at her, but sleep felt distant. Instead, Olivia wandered to the porch, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders as she stepped into the cool night air. The forest stretched before her, a sea of shadows and quiet whispers carried by the wind. For the first time in weeks, she felt her shoulders loosen. Her gaze drifted upward to the stars, scattered like distant promises against the dark. Her breath escaped in a quiet exhale. "We'll be okay," she whispered, though it felt as much a plea as a declaration. The triplets' faces flashed in her mind, innocent, trusting. She couldn't fail them, not now. Her mother appeared behind her holding 2 steaming mugs. "Chamomile," she said, offering one to Olivia. "You look like you could use it." Olivia took the mug gratefully, wrapping her fingers around the warmth. I didn't think it would end like this," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Her mother sat beside her, her hand resting gently on Olivia's. "Endings are rarely what we expect, but you've made the right choice, for them and for you." The two sat in companionable silence, the night wrapping around them like a balm. In the distance, an owl hooted, its call mingling with the rustling of the trees. Olivia sipped her tea, the warmth spreading through her chest. She turned back toward the house, where the soft glow of the nursery light filtered through the window. The triplets were safe. That was what mattered. For the first time in a long time, Olivia felt a flicker of peace. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The Vermont morning was brisk, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. Olivia stood at the edge of the porch, watching the triplets tumble around the playpen her mother had set up in the yard. Their giggles were the only thing keeping her anchored. Her new reality weighed heavy on her. Endless diaper changes, sleepless nights, and the growing fear of how she would sustain this fragile peace. The car keys dangled in her hand. Today, she needed to make the long drive to town for supplies and a job application at the local grocery store. A pang of unease settled in her chest as she glanced at her rusted sedan. It had seen better days. "Let's hope you can handle it," she muttered under her breath. An hour later, the car sputtered to a halt on the edge of a quiet two-lane road leading into town. Olivia gripped the steering wheel, muttering a string of expletives as the engine coughed once, twice, and died completely. The triplets, strapped into their car seats, began to fuss. Nick's small whimper crescendoed into a full-blown cry. Olivia buried her face in her hands, feeling the familiar prick of tears threatening to spill. Okay, she whispered to herself. Just think. You've handled worse. She was about to step out and inspect the car, though she knew next to nothing about engines, when a pickup truck slowed to a stop beside her. A man in a plaid shirt leaned out the driver's side window, his face partially obscured by a baseball cap. His voice was deep but warm as he called out, "Need some help?" Olivia hesitated, her city instincts warning her against accepting help from strangers, but the kindness in his tone, paired with her desperation, made her nod. "It just stopped on me," she said, stepping back as he got out of the truck. The man was broad-shouldered, his movements easy and confident. As he approached, he tipped his cap back, revealing a face lined with years of hard work, but softened by a genuine smile. "I'm Kevin," he said, wiping his hands on his jeans before extending one toward her. "You must be new around here." "Olivia," she replied, shaking his hand briefly. "And, yeah, just moved in with my mother." "Figured as much. Small town. I know most folks." He crouched beside the car, popping the hood and inspecting the engine. "Looks like your alternator's gone. Probably best to tow it to Dave's garage in town." Olivia exhaled, the news hitting her harder than she expected. "A tow," she echoed, glancing toward the triplets, who had grown quieter but still squirmed in their seats. "Great." Kevin stood, brushing off his hands. "Tell you what, I'll call Dave and get him out here with his truck. You'll be in town before lunch." His gaze flicked toward the car. "3 little ones in tow, huh? You've got your hands full." Olivia offered a weak smile. "You could say that." By the time Dave arrived, Kevin had managed to entertain the triplets with goofy faces and a few blades of grass plucked from the roadside. Olivia watched from the side, arms crossed, unsure what to make of the man. He was unassuming, sure, but there was something steady about him, an easiness that contrasted sharply with the chaos of her recent months. When the car was loaded onto the tow truck, Kevin turned to her. "Need a ride into town?" Olivia hesitated, glancing at her children. "I don't want to impose." Kevin smiled. "It's no trouble. Besides, I think these guys like me." He nodded toward Nick, who was now staring at Kevin with wide, curious eyes. Over the next few weeks, Kevin became a regular fixture in Olivia's life. The first time he dropped by the house, it was to return the diaper bag she had accidentally left in his truck. The second time, he brought a toolkit, fixing the loose porch railing she hadn't mentioned but had been silently cursing every day. He didn't ask questions. He didn't push. He simply showed up, always ready to lend a hand. Slowly, Olivia began to let her guard down. She let him carry groceries inside, handed him a screwdriver when he offered to fix the broken crib latch, and even allowed him to babysit the triplets while she filled out job applications. One afternoon, as Olivia folded laundry in the living room, she heard bursts of laughter coming from the yard. Peeking out the window, she saw Kevin lying on the grass, pretending to be a dragon as the triplets climbed all over him. Nick roared triumphantly, tugging at Kevin's flannel sleeve, while Peter and Noah collapsed in giggles nearby. Olivia leaned against the windowsill, a faint smile tugging at her lips. The sight was so absurdly joyful, so unguarded, that she found herself laughing quietly. It was the first time she'd laughed in weeks. Kevin caught her eye through the window, grinning as he sat up. "Careful, Olivia," he called. "I might recruit them as my sidekicks." Olivia shook her head, smiling despite herself. She didn't respond, but something in her chest felt lighter. The Boston skyline loomed through the rain-speckled windows of Thomas's office. He sat at his desk, his head resting heavily in his hands. Olivia's departure had left a gaping void in his life, one he hadn't been able to fill with work, late nights at the bar, or even hollow arguments with his father. The echo of her words in her farewell letter haunted him. "I need to find a place where love isn't a question and trust isn't a test." Thomas clenched his jaw, his fists tightening against the cool surface of his desk. He loved her. God, he loved her. But his doubt, his silence, those had spoken louder than any words of love ever could. The sound of muffled voices from the next room pulled him from his thoughts. His father's stern baritone and his mother's softer, more pleading tone filtered through the thick walls of their family home. Thomas stood, curiosity and irritation stirring within him. Conversations in hushed tones between his parents were nothing new, but tonight, something felt different, charged, even dangerous. He stepped closer to the door of the study, the words becoming clearer as his father's voice rose. "Helen, stop dancing around the question. Why are you so defensive about Olivia leaving?" "Because—" There was a long pause before his mother spoke again, her voice strained. "Because Thomas doesn't know everything." A heavy silence hung in the air. Thomas's pulse quickened. He pushed the door open, his presence interrupting whatever tense confession had been brewing. "Doesn't know what, Mother?" he demanded, his tone sharper than intended. His mother froze, her delicate hands clutching the back of a chair. His father turned to him, his expression clouded with suspicion. "Thomas, this isn't the time," his father began, but Thomas cut him off. "No." Thomas's eyes darted between them. "You've been hiding something. What is it?" Helen's gaze dropped to the floor. Her lips quivered as she spoke, barely above a whisper. "Your father isn't biologically yours." The words hit Thomas like a punch to the gut. His world tilted on its axis, and for a moment he thought he might lose his footing. What are you saying?" Helen sank into the chair, her hands trembling. "I had an affair," she admitted, her voice breaking. "With a man, a black man. You're his child." His father's expression darkened. "Helen, how long?" "Decades, James," she snapped, her voice sharp and defensive. "I kept this secret to protect you, to protect Thomas, to protect this family. But I've paid for it every day since." Thomas staggered back, the room closing in around him. His mind raced, images of his life flashing through his head. His father's cold demeanor, his mother's quiet guilt, his own doubts about the triplets. The pieces fell into place, each one sharper than the last. "You let me doubt Olivia," Thomas whispered, his voice cracking. "You let me believe those children weren't mine." Knowing, he trailed off, his chest heaving. Helen reached out, her eyes filled with tears. "I didn't know how to tell you." "You didn't know?" he roared, stepping back. "Do you have any idea what you've done? What I've done?" His father stood stiffly, his silence cutting through the room like ice. This doesn't change the fact that Olivia... Don't. Thomas's glare silenced him. Don't you dare blame her. That night, Thomas sat alone in his apartment, a glass of whiskey untouched on the table beside him. His mind reeled with guilt, anger, and shame. He had been blind to his own insecurities, blind to his mother's lies, blind to what Olivia had needed from him. He stared at the photograph on the wall, taken on the day the triplets were born. Olivia's radiant smile, her arms cradling the babies, his own stiff posture beside her, a shadow of doubt in his eyes that the camera hadn't captured, but that Thomas now saw clearly. He pressed his forehead against the cool glass of the window, the city lights below blurring into streaks. The weight of his failure pressed heavily on his chest. Olivia had been right to leave. He hadn't deserved her. But he couldn't let it end this way. Not without an apology. Not without making things right. The next morning, Thomas placed a call to a private investigator. I need to find someone, he said, his voice hoarse from a sleepless night. Olivia Hayes. She left Boston with 3 children, start in Vermont. It was a long shot, but it was all he had. As he hung up, his fingers lingered on the photograph on his desk. He traced the edge of Olivia's face, his heart aching with regret. I'm sorry, he whispered, though no one was there to hear it. For the first time in months, Thomas felt a sliver of clarity. This wasn't just about Olivia. It was about the family he had doubted, the trust he had shattered. He didn't know if he could ever earn her forgiveness, but he had to try. Vermont's air carried a crispness that Olivia couldn't ignore, a reminder that winter was inching closer. The mornings came earlier and colder now, and each day seemed to offer her small glimpses of the life she was trying to rebuild. The triplets had adjusted quickly to their new surroundings, their laughter echoing through the house like sunlight filtering into dark corners. Olivia, however, found herself caught in a tangle of emotions. Both hope and grief pulling her in opposing directions. She sat at the kitchen table, a steaming cup of tea warming her hands. From the window, she could see Kevin in the yard, mending the fence with a quiet determination. The triplets sat in a row on a blanket nearby, entranced by Kevin's steady movements as he hammered a new post into place. Nick occasionally tried to mimic the motion, his tiny hands gripping an invisible hammer. Olivia's lips curved into a faint smile, but it faded quickly. Her chest tightened as she thought of Thomas. There were moments, especially late at night when the house was still, that her anger softened into something closer to longing. She hated herself for it, for missing the man who had questioned her integrity and broken her heart. But she couldn't deny the ache that still lingered. An ache for what they had once been, or what she had believed they were. The next day, Olivia took her first steps toward independence. With Kevin's help, she had found a part-time job at the local library, a small, quiet building nestled in the heart of town. It wasn't much, but it was a start. She found comfort in the order of it, the rhythm of shelving books and assisting the occasional patron. For a few hours each day, she could focus on something outside of her own pain. Kevin, true to his dependable nature, offered to watch the triplets while she worked. At first, Olivia hesitated. She wasn't ready to trust anyone, not fully. But Kevin had a way of disarming her defenses, not with grand gestures, but with his quiet consistency. The triplets adored him, and she couldn't deny the ease he brought to their lives. One evening, after dinner, and the triplets had been put to bed, Olivia found herself on the porch again. The stars above were sharp and clear, their brilliance undiminished by city lights. She pulled her sweater tighter around her shoulders, the chill biting through the fabric. Kevin appeared at the door, holding 2 mugs of coffee. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. Olivia gestured toward the empty chair beside her. "Of course." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the steam from their mugs curling into the cold air. Olivia traced the rim of her cup, her thoughts heavy. Finally she spoke, her voice low. "Sometimes I don't know if I'm moving forward or just running away." Kevin didn't respond immediately. He took a sip of his coffee, his gaze steady on the horizon. "I think running away can be the first step forward," he said. "You had to leave to protect yourself. That's not running. That's surviving." Olivia looked at him, her eyes searching his face. "I feel so broken, Kevin," she admitted, her voice trembling. "What kind of mother am I, if I can't even keep it together for my kids?" Kevin set his mug down on the porch railing. "Olivia," he said softly, turning to face her fully. "You're here. You're doing the hard thing. Raising 3 kids, starting over, finding your footing. That's not broken. That's strength." Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, but she blinked them away. "Thomas, he made me feel like I wasn't enough. Like I had to prove myself even to him." Kevin's jaw tightened briefly, but he said nothing of Thomas. Instead, he reached for her hand, his touch warm and steady. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone, least of all him." Olivia stared at their hands, his rough calluses, a contrast to her own delicate fingers. For the first time in what felt like forever, she felt the weight in her chest begin to lift. Kevin's words didn't fix everything, but they created space for something new, something lighter. The triplets' laughter filled the yard the next afternoon as Olivia watched from the kitchen window. Kevin had built a makeshift obstacle course, and the boys were toddling through it with wide-eyed enthusiasm. Peter crawled under a chair draped with a blanket, while Nick attempted to balance on a wooden beam Kevin had laid on the ground. Noah clapped his hands, cheering his brothers on. Olivia leaned against the counter, a soft smile playing on her lips. She hadn't felt this kind of peace in years. Watching Kevin with the boys, so effortlessly patient and playful, stirred something deep inside her. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was something close. Kevin looked up and caught her eye through the window. He grinned, lifting Nick onto his shoulders as if to say, "Look at what we've built together." Olivia chuckled softly, shaking her head. She didn't respond, but her smile lingered. For the first time, the future didn't feel so daunting. There was still hurt, still anger, still the shadow of Thomas's betrayal. But there was also hope, faint, flickering, but growing stronger with every passing day. Every new beginning is precious and good. So what did you eat for breakfast today? We really want to imagine the taste and aroma of food somewhere. Leave the name of the dish in the comments while I continue telling the story. The private investigator placed the folded paper on Thomas's desk, his movements precise and deliberate. "It wasn't easy," he said, adjusting his tie as though the effort of the search had been monumental. "She's staying in Vermont, small town, barely a blip on the map. Quiet, tucked away, just starting over. Starting over." The words lingered in Thomas's mind like a stubborn echo. He had imagined her every day since she'd left. The way she held the triplets close, the determination in her eyes when she packed her things. He wondered what she looked like now, if the hurt he'd caused still shadowed her face, or if it had been replaced with something stronger. Thomas's hand hovered over the paper before finally picking it up. The address was handwritten in neat, blocky letters. Vermont. He exhaled deeply, staring at the words until they blurred. 5 months. 5 long months since Olivia had left Boston, since her absence had carved a hollow in his life that no amount of work or distraction could fill. "Thank you," Thomas said, his voice quieter than he'd intended. The investigator nodded once and left without another word, the door clicking shut behind him. Alone in his office, Thomas turned the paper over in his hands. Vermont. She had taken their boys to a place far removed from the noise of the city, to a life he hadn't been part of building. He leaned back in his chair, the room's silence pressing against him. What would he say when he saw her? Would she even agree to listen? Apologizing felt like trying to patch a shattered vase, the pieces never fitting quite right again. But he had to try. His decision was made before he realized he'd stood, already reaching for his coat. The weight of the address in his pocket felt both grounding and heavy. "It's time," he muttered under his breath as he headed for the door. The Vermont road was winding and unfamiliar, flanked by tall pines that whispered in the wind. Thomas gripped the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles pale against the leather. A part of him wanted to turn back, to retreat to the chaos of Boston, where guilt and regret could at least be drowned out by the noise of the city. But here, in this stillness, there was no place for distractions, only the weight of what he had come to do. As the GPS announced his destination, Thomas slowed, his pulse quickening. The house came into view, a modest structure nestled against the forest, its porch bathed in soft sunlight. Laughter floated through the air, and Thomas's chest tightened at the sound. He parked the car a safe distance away, out of sight, and stepped out into the cool, crisp air. From his vantage point, he could see Olivia. She was sitting on the porch steps, her face tilted toward the sky, her expression calm in a way he hadn't seen in years. Nearby, the triplets giggled and toddled around Kevin, who was on all fours pretending to be a lion. Noah clung to Kevin's back, squealing with delight, while Nick and Peter darted in and out of his reach. Thomas's breath caught in his throat. The scene before him was so achingly different from the life he had left behind. The woman who had once been consumed by his doubts and accusations now radiated a quiet strength. She looked happy. Thomas stayed rooted in place, hidden behind the cover of the trees. He had prepared himself for this moment, rehearsed what he would say, how he would apologize. But now, seeing Olivia like this, words seemed meaningless. What right did he have to disrupt the peace she had found? What could he possibly offer her that she didn't already have? He reached into his pocket and pulled out the letter he had written the night before. It was neatly folded, his handwriting careful but hurried, the ink smudged in places where his hand had trembled. He unfolded it once more, reading the words he had poured from his heart. "Olivia, I don't know where to begin. How do you ask forgiveness for something unforgivable? For doubting the person who deserved your trust the most? For failing you and failing our children? You were right to leave, and I don't blame you. I only blame myself. For my silence, for my cowardice, for letting my own insecurities poison what we had. I see that now, in ways I couldn't before. And knowing the truth about myself doesn't make it easier. It only deepens my regret. I was blind, Olivia. Blind to the beauty and strength you gave to our family. Blind to the miracle of our boys. I see them in my mind, every day. Peter's determined little frown, Nick's wide-eyed curiosity, Noah's infectious laugh. I see them, and I know I don't deserve to be their father. But more than that, I know I don't deserve you. I won't ask for a second chance, because I know it's not mine to ask. All I can say is that I'm sorry. I am so sorry, Olivia, for everything. I only want you to be happy. If you found that happiness now, hold on to it. You deserve every moment of it. Please know that wherever I go, a part of my heart will always remain with you and our boys. Thomas. The sound of Olivia's voice drew his attention back to the house. She was calling the boys to her, scooping Peter into her arms while Kevin carried Noah on his shoulders. Nick trotted behind them, clutching a leaf he had found, his face glowing with pride. Thomas's chest tightened painfully. He folded the letter carefully and stepped closer to the house, his movements slow and deliberate. He placed the envelope on the porch, near the door where Olivia would see it, then stepped back quickly before he could second-guess himself. As he walked back to his car, he stole one last glance at the house. Olivia had settled into the porch swing with Peter on her lap, the other two boys climbing up beside her. Kevin stood nearby, laughing at something Nick had said. They looked like a family, a real one. Thomas climbed into his car and closed the door softly. He sat there for a long moment, staring through the windshield at the life he had lost. Then, with a deep breath, he started the engine and drove away. Olivia found the letter later that evening, after the boys had gone to bed. She recognized Thomas's handwriting immediately, her stomach twisting as she unfolded the paper. She read it slowly, her eyes lingering on each word, her heart catching on the raw emotion in his apology. By the time she reached the end, tears were streaming down her face. She pressed the letter to her chest, her emotions swirling in a chaotic mix of sadness, closure, and something like relief. She sat there for a long time, the letter still in her hands. She felt the full weight of her anger and grief lift slightly, replaced by a tentative peace. Thomas's words didn't erase the past, but they gave her something she hadn't realized she needed: an ending. Outside, the stars were bright and sharp, the night air cool against her skin as she stepped onto the porch. She looked out at the woods, as if expecting to see Thomas's silhouette lingering there. But the road was empty, the world silent, except for the rustling of leaves in the breeze. Olivia took a deep breath, the letter still clutched in her hands. "Goodbye, Thomas," she whispered, her voice steady. And for the first time, it felt like the start of something new. 2 years passed so quickly, the painful memories seemed to melt into the ocean. The triplets were unusually quiet, their chubby faces tilted in curiosity as they watched Kevin fiddle with the candles on the dining table. Olivia noticed how the faint light danced against his features, softening the edges of his strong jaw and kind eyes. The house smelled of baked chicken and rosemary, the warmth of the kitchen chasing away the autumn chill that seeped through the windows. Dinner had been a small celebration, a simple evening shared between Olivia, Kevin, and the boys. The triplets had taken turns giggling at Kevin's exaggerated stories of wrestling wild bears in the Vermont woods. Olivia found herself laughing along, her heart lighter than it had been in years. After dessert, Kevin cleared his throat. "I have something I want to say," he began, his voice steady but softer than usual. The triplets quieted immediately, sensing something important. Olivia's brow furrowed, but before she could speak, Kevin reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, wooden box. Her breath caught. "Olivia," Kevin said, kneeling down so he was eye level with her. "I didn't know my life was missing anything until you and these boys walked into it. You've shown me what family can look like, what it feels like to love without conditions. And I want to spend the rest of my life proving that to you." Her hands flew to her mouth as the boys began to cheer. Nick tugged at her sleeve. "Say yes, Mommy," he exclaimed, his face lighting up like the candles on the table. Tears brimmed in Olivia's eyes. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "Kevin, I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Kevin whispered, his tone gentle, his smile unwavering. The triplets clambered into her lap, their tiny voices echoing in agreement. Olivia looked at Kevin, his patient love evident in every line of his face. The room blurred as tears slipped down her cheeks. "Yes," she finally said, her voice cracking. "Yes, Kevin." The boys whooped in triumph, hugging her tightly as Kevin slipped the simple gold band onto her finger. He stood, pulling her into his arms, and for the first time in years, Olivia felt like she was exactly where she belonged. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of quiet excitement. Word of the engagement spread quickly through the small town, and soon the community rallied around Olivia and Kevin to help prepare for their wedding. Neighbors arrived with baskets of fresh flowers and hand-stitched linens. The local baker offered to make the cake, while the church lent its small chapel for the ceremony. Olivia's mother was a whirlwind of activity, sewing ribbons into the boys' tiny suits while doting on her daughter in rare moments of stillness. "You deserve this," she said one evening, resting her hand over Olivia's. "Don't let the past keep you from accepting the happiness in front of you." The wedding day arrived with the golden glow of late autumn. The chapel was modest but beautiful, adorned with wild flowers and candles that filled the room with warmth. Olivia stood at the entrance, her gown simple yet elegant, her heart racing as the triplets tugged at her skirt impatiently. "Let's go, Mommy," Peter urged, his small hand in hers. She nodded, taking a steadying breath before stepping into the chapel. Her eyes found Kevin immediately. He stood at the altar, his face breaking into a smile that melted away any lingering doubts she had. The ceremony was brief, but filled with quiet joy. As Olivia and Kevin exchanged vows, the triplets stood by their sides, their presence a testament to the new family they had become. Olivia's voice wavered slightly, but Kevin's steady gaze grounded her. And by the time they kissed, the room erupted into applause. That evening, under a canopy of stars, Olivia and Kevin swayed gently to the faint hum of music coming from the open windows of the house. The boys had finally fallen asleep after a day of endless excitement, and the air was thick with the mingling scents of pine and distant wood smoke. Olivia rested her head against Kevin's chest, listening to the rhythm of his heartbeat. "Did you ever think we'd be here?" she asked softly. Kevin chuckled, his arms tightening around her. "Not in a million years. But I wouldn't change a thing." Olivia tilted her head to look up at him, her smile soft. "Neither would I." For the first time, in what felt like forever, Olivia's heart was quiet. The ache of the past had softened into something manageable, and in its place was a profound sense of peace. She closed her eyes, allowing herself to simply exist in the moment. The stars above a silent witness to her new beginning. The sun hung low over the Boston skyline, casting long shadows across the office where Thomas sat. His desk, once cluttered with papers and plans, was now bare, except for a single photo of Olivia and the triplets, a snapshot of the life he had destroyed and could never reclaim. Yet today was not about mourning what was lost. Today was about doing something meaningful with the time he still had. "Sell it all," Thomas instructed his lawyer, his tone firm. "The company, the properties, everything." The lawyer blinked, clearly startled. "Thomas, are you sure? This will—" "I'm sure," Thomas interrupted, his voice steady. "Use the proceeds to establish the fund, and name it after Olivia." Weeks later, the Olivia Fund for Children was born. Designed to provide resources and education for underprivileged children, the initiative quickly gained traction. The idea of a man giving up his empire to atone for his mistakes caught the public's imagination, and donations poured in from across the country. Thomas worked tirelessly, throwing himself into the project as if it could somehow cleanse him of the guilt that still lingered. But there was one thing he couldn't do alone. He sat at his desk late one evening, staring at the letter he had drafted. Unlike the one he had left on Olivia's porch, this was an invitation. a request for her and Kevin to co-manage the fund. He knew the gesture could never undo the damage he had caused, but it was his way of honoring her strength, her resilience, and the family she had built without him. The envelope was mailed the next day, accompanied by a substantial financial gift for Olivia and the triplets. In Vermont, Olivia was startled to find a thick package addressed to her in Thomas's handwriting. Her hands shook slightly as she opened it, Kevin watching silently from across the room. "I don't know," Olivia said, her voice trailing off as she glanced at Kevin. "It feels like he's trying to buy forgiveness." "Olivia, I hope this finds you well. I won't pretend I deserve your time, but I wanted to share something important with you. After a great deal of thought, I've decided to sell my company and redirect my energy towards something meaningful. It's called the Olivia Fund, a charity dedicated to helping underprivileged children and single parents find support, safety, and opportunities. It's the least I can do to honor you, to honor the strength you've shown, and to atone for the mistakes I made. Enclosed, you'll find a financial gift for the boys. It's for their future, for whatever they need to thrive. Please use it however you see fit. I also wanted to ask if you and Kevin would consider co-managing the fund. I've watched it grow, but I believe you're the ones who can shape it into something truly transformative. You've shown me what resilience looks like. I know this fund belongs in your hands. I won't impose further. Whatever you decide, I hope you know how deeply sorry I am and how grateful I am for everything you gave me. Thomas." Olivia sat at the table, the letter trembling in her hands. Her emotions surged, a strange mix of surprise, anger, gratitude, and sorrow. The triplets, oblivious to the weight of the moment, played on the floor with blocks, their laughter grounding her. "Kevin," she called softly, her voice catching. He appeared from the next room, wiping his hands on a cloth. "What is it?" Olivia handed him the letter silently. As he read, his brows furrowed, and when he finished, he placed it on the table, his expression thoughtful. "It's a big gesture," he said, his voice steady. "And the money. It's no small thing." She nodded, her throat tight. "I don't know if I can trust it. Trust him." Kevin sat beside her, taking her hand. "Pam, this isn't about him anymore. It's about the boys. It's about the chance to help people who are where you once were." He gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. "You've always wanted to make a difference. Maybe this is how." Over the next few weeks, Olivia wrestled with the decision, but Kevin's words stayed with her. Slowly, she began to see the potential of the fund, not as an extension of Thomas's guilt, but as an opportunity to channel her own strength into something greater. Her first meeting with the fund's board members was nerve-wracking. She and Kevin walked into the sleek conference room in Boston, surrounded by polished professionals. But when Olivia spoke about her vision, creating resources for struggling parents, building scholarships for children, and providing emergency housing for families in need, the room fell silent with awe. Months passed, and the Olivia Fund grew beyond what anyone had imagined. Stories of families lifted out of poverty, of children attending school for the first time, and of parents finding jobs and support poured in from all over the country. Olivia threw herself into the work, often staying late into the night with Kevin by her side. The triplets became fixtures at the fund's events, charming everyone with their boundless energy. At one fundraiser, Peter climbed onto a small stage and shouted, "Thank you for helping us help other kids." The audience erupted in applause, their generosity swelling the fund's resources. One evening, Olivia and Kevin stood in the ballroom of a grand hotel in New York City, attending a gala in honor of the fund's achievements. Olivia wore a simple yet elegant gown, and Kevin's arm rested comfortably around her waist as they mingled with donors and supporters. During the keynote speech, Olivia was invited to the stage. As she spoke, her voice steady and clear. She felt the weight of her journey, every hardship, every heartbreak, transform into something meaningful. "We all have moments when life feels impossible," she said, her eyes scanning the crowd. "But with the right support, with love and compassion, we can build something beautiful out of the rubble." That's what the Olivia Fund is about, helping others find their way, just as I found mine. As she stepped down, the applause was thunderous, and Kevin met her with a smile that mirrored her own. "You're amazing," he whispered, his voice full of pride. That night, as they danced under the chandeliers, Olivia felt a deep sense of fulfillment.